According to the New Testament, 40 days after Jesus was raised from the dead, he ascended into heaven. Now, at that point, many people today, including many Christians, just freak out. What on earth, or rather away from earth, is this all about? And some churches don't make life any easier for us because you get stained glass windows with a picture of a cloud and the disciples down below looking up and 2 feet sticking down from the cloud as Jesus disappears upwards, as though he's some kind of primitive spaceman. Now, actually, most people in the ancient world didn't believe that heaven, God's space, was actually up there in the sky somewhere. So what was it that they were trying to say? In fact, most people in the biblical world didn't believe that heaven was a long way away at all. They thought of heaven and earth as overlapping, interlocking spheres of reality. So that when they talked about Jesus going away into heaven, what they meant was that Jesus was going away from our world into God's world, but that wasn't a long way away. And the significance of that to begin with was that God's world can touch any point in our world simultaneously. So that whereas when Jesus was here within our space-time universe, he could only be in one place at a time, he can now be present to all his people everywhere, wherever they are. But that's not all. In the Bible, part of the point of heaven is that heaven is the control room for earth, so that the one who dwells in heaven is the one who is actually sovereign over or in charge over what goes on in our world. But what did that mean? Did that mean that as soon as Jesus was ascended, he could snap his fingers, as it were, and make emperors tremble all around the world and do his bidding? Well, no, not quite like that, although actually, within a century of Jesus' resurrection and ascension, the emperor in Rome was getting letters from provincial governors around the place saying, what do we do with these Christians? They seem to be all over the place, and whatever we do to them, they still seem to be multiplying. There are more and more of them. How are we going to cope? Because, in fact, the way by which that strange sovereignty of Jesus began to be exercised wasn't in the way that we do power by sending in the tanks and forcing people to do what you want, was by sending his followers out to do the same kind of stuff that Jesus had done, to love people, to tell them stories about God and his ways with the world, to tell particularly the story of what Jesus himself had done, to create communities which would be world-transforming communities. And if you read the book of Acts, you'll find that that is precisely what followed on from the ascension of Jesus. Oh, and there's one other thing as well. In the Roman Empire, people often thought that when an emperor had died, his soul was taken off into heaven, and he therefore became divine. Now, the early Christians were quite clear that the Roman emperors had got so many things wrong that they weren't simply just copying that. But for anyone in the Roman world who read a book like Acts, beginning with the ascension of this royal figure to heaven, they would say, oh my goodness, this is a kind of anything the Roman emperors can do, we can do better sort of moment. And the answer is yes. There is a new sort of God, because the God who made the world, the God who is revealed in Jesus, isn't just like the old pagan gods. He is the new creator. He is the rescuer. This is the real thing. That's part, at least, of the significance that the early Christians gave to the ascension of Jesus.